Hi, Democrats. Today is Tuesday, June 27th, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Happy Tuesday. Well, if you've seen my advertisement, I was meant to be joined by DNC committeeman David Walters. He's been waylaid by work. Oh, look, he's just joined. So we will be joined by David Walters today. Good news. So just as a reminder, now is the time to get involved. If you don't know how to get in touch with your county chair, please go out to our website, okdemocrats.org, click on Our Party, click on Find My Party, and it'll send an email to your county officers, and they should give you a call. So I'm being joined today. I feel kind of giddy. I'm being joined today by former Governor David Walters, who is currently serving as the Oklahoma Democratic Party DNC committeeman, which means he is a member of the DNC. He's a member of the DNC Executive Committee, and the DNC needs that voice to be speaking up for Oklahoma and be bringing ideas back to Oklahoma of how we can build our party. Now, I keep calling him Governor Walters because he was governor, and that's why I've invited him to join us today. So join me in welcoming Governor David Walters. Hi, Governor.
Hi, Alicia. I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Is there... Let's see if I can pop it up here. Nope.
Well, I hope that you can hear me as we go.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. I'm just going to have to lean in.
Okay.
Something's missing on the mic here. Let me see.
All righty. So while he does that, I'm going to talk a little bit give you guys a little bit of background. You've heard me whining for a week about being without electricity. Well, I got electricity back on Sunday, but that was after 7 full days of no electricity. I had a lot of time to think about how our state government was failing so many of our citizens, since I was one being failed at the time. I'm stalling, Governor. Give me a finger when you're ready. And so when it first happened, our current governor was not even in the country. He was in Paris, supposedly trying to bring business back to Oklahoma. And I still don't know where the lieutenant governor was, but he wasn't in Oklahoma. 2 or 3 days in, Senate Pro Tem Greg Treat announced that he had just found out that he was acting governor. And I don't really know what happened because I didn't have electricity. But there are so many failures in that little story. Governor, can you hear me yet?
I can. Thank you. I was there was something off on the microphone. So
I'm going to ask you a really simple question. What are the odds that Speaker Pro Tem didn't know he was the acting governor?
I'm guessing that there's a tendency, I think, for governors to want to leave the state and come back without anybody knowing about it, and certainly without the baton being passed to someone down the ranks. And so with both the lieutenant governor and the governor out of town, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I can imagine that they might have thought that they would just slip out and come back, and no one would notice. I don't know. It seemed unusual.
All the way to Paris?
I'd take Senator Treat at his word that he was unaware of it, because he did seem truly surprised. Normally, there's a document that is filed. The staff is going to fill out something that is either resides at the Secretary of State or is used as a notice to whoever is going to step in. So I'm a little surprised that he was surprised, and I'm surprised if they didn't use that process.
So tell my viewers, when were you governor?
I don't remember. No, let's see. I was elected in 1990. I ran in 1986 in a spirited race. I beat poor old Mike Turpin in the Democratic primary, and then was the nominee that took on Henry Bellman, a former governor, former U.S. senator, and that was a very close election. People were quite surprised that we ran it that close, but it was about 1.5% off. And but Governor Bellman was elected and served, and then I thought I had had enough in 1986, ran in 1990 and was elected, carried 75 of the 77 counties. Pete beat poor old Bill Price, former U.S. attorney, in the general election, and then was inaugurated in 91, served a term until 1995.
Awesome. So what was your proudest achievement as governor?
Well, I think surviving the Daily Oklahoman. Well, that's too glib. I thought quality jobs was a very creative piece of legislation. A lot of people have heard that name, but quality jobs was a mechanism. And the brief background is that there was one of these great big companies that was looking to relocate. In this case, it was United Airlines Maintenance Division. We had American Airlines Maintenance in Tulsa. We thought having that huge, job creator in Oklahoma City would be fantastic. And so a proposal was put together and presented. And it was very difficult because every time the proposal had to be changed, I had to go to the legislative leadership and talk them into it. And back then we had Democratic House and Democratic Senate. But still yet it was a difficult and cumbersome process. So we put the best package on the table, and sadly they decided to go to Indiana, and Steve Wolf, the CFO of United Airlines, was quoted as saying he couldn't see himself in Oklahoma. And so that was kind of a telling comment, I think. And so we were very disappointed by it. But out of that, we had our Secretary of Commerce, who a gentleman by the name of Greg Main, who I had recruited out of Michigan. Not many governors recruit their members of the cabinet from areas of expertise, but Greg was in the Michigan development process and was quite skilled. And I asked Greg to put together the biggest job incentive package he could, or the most effective job incentive package. And he came up with quality jobs, had to have insurance, had to have a well-paying job. And if you could create that job, then we would refund over a period of time, over a 10-year period, your payroll taxes. So you'd be payroll tax free, save the company a lot of money. Later, legislatures have grabbed that and have capitalized that and made it an upfront payment in many cases. But the effect was good. The U.S. News and World Report said it was the most effective job creation vehicle in the country. And I was a rock star when I'd go to California and recruit trucking companies and other groups to move out of California into Oklahoma. And it was a very effective tool. And so we set a 15-year record for job creation in Oklahoma during that period of time, and we were proud of that. And quality jobs was a big part of that. The other thing, though, is that without any tax increases, we were able to increase public education funding during my 4 years by 38%. Now, let me say that again, 38%. So if you don't believe it, you can look up an AP story that was written at the end of our term that summarized that. The prior governor and legislature had passed House Bill 1017, and they had raised a portion of money, but it was only half of the money needed to fund all of the improvements in that massive educational reform bill, which lowered class sizes, increased teacher salaries, and did a number of other things. And so they left it to us to fund the balance. And so we literally, I remember we had to find $125 million, which doesn't sound like much these days, but back then that was a big deal. We had to find $125 million every year to fund the remaining $500 million of that package. Now, if you think about it, I'm talking in 1990 dollars. What has recently happened, I posted something congratulating the leadership of the state for increasing public education finally by 22%. During Mary Fallon's time in office, education funding dropped 38%, just a shocking decline in terms of support. So most of the increases that we had put in those many years ago have since been wiped out. But I was amused to watch the governor and the legislative leadership say it was landmark, it was historic, it was the biggest increase in history. not so. Back in the day, some young, handsome governor that still had hair passed or was able to fund public education such that we had a 38% increase over 4 years. I'll point out that in Governor Stitt's first 4 years, public education funding went up 5%. And so if you take that 5% and add it to the 22, 21, it's not clear to me exactly what the percentage is. Well, then they're in the 27, 28%. And that isn't to be sneezed at. They did almost all of that in 1 year, but it's still not what we had done back in the day. And so the jobs bill and the rest of that was something I can rattle on about other accomplishments, but I think education funding and creating jobs was a big deal for us.
So the jobs is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about quality jobs because supposedly, you know what, I'm going to assume good intentions. The governor was in Paris trying to woo aviation jobs back to Oklahoma. And he goes, like, he swings for the fences. He goes for these really big companies to come here when, maybe we could do a bunch of smaller companies and actually grow our unemployment. And you and I have had conversations about job growth. I'd like for you to talk about what your idea about how we could actually make more jobs and feed small businesses in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm sure they were just working their nubs off over there. But I didn't find it necessary to ever go to the Paris Air Show. The Paris Air Show is more of a collection of arms dealers than it is a real recruiting process for aerospace industry. So, and if you want to go see Paris, and it's summertime, and you take the family, and somehow all that gets paid for by the state. But anyway, I'll set that aside. The way you create aerospace jobs is you work on education specialties like we did back in the day in our what was then called, now it's called Career Tech, but what was then called the VOTEC system. And so we had all of these aerospace presences, or we had all this aerospace education going on adjacent to companies that were willing to locate at our major airports and elsewhere to develop their business. And today we've got groups like DRG, which is a huge operation here in Oklahoma City, run by Phil Busey and family-owned operation, hundreds of millions of dollars of federal contracts, and a very big presence. And every time you talk to Phil, you will hear the words of workforce development come out of his mouth, and that's very critical to build the basis upon which we are attracted. We're naturally attracted. This is like paying Enel $250 million to come to Oklahoma, where they were already, because we have a lot of wind. They're a wind company, and now they've decided they want to build photovoltaic cells, which is great. But I don't think we need to spend $250 million to attract somebody that's already there. We are flat. We're dry. We're sunny. Unfortunately, like today, we're extremely hot. But we're a natural location.
We're affordable.
We're very affordable, but we're a natural location for aerospace locations, ergo Wichita, Kansas, and lots of other hubs of aerospace industry around. And that gets developed not by large-scale companies. It gets developed by building an environment, having a workforce, having the training centers that can quickly engage with these companies as they come here and consider locating here.
So you and I have talked about this sell of, telling smaller companies, we'll give you, some relief if you create X amount of jobs within 5 years.
Well, this is, I think we learned a lot. I mean, we've watched Joe Biden and his administration kind of expertly craft programs that, whether it's infrastructure reduction or whether it's the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan bill, we always say, because there were some Republicans that voted for that one alone. and then the Infrastructure Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act and all of that.
Inflation Reduction Act.
Inflation Reduction Act, all of that has infused our economy significantly. But one of the programs that we had coming out of the pandemic was the Payroll Protection Plan, and that was basically if you could hang on to your jobs, you got a subsidy, and if you didn't hang on to the jobs, well, then that converted to a loan, and you had to pay it back. And so our company did that. Almost every company, organizations, it was open to nonprofits, et cetera. And that kept, I think, the United States from falling off a cliff during the pandemic. It was marvelously helpful. We could do, if the Republican leadership and the legislature and the governor really have $1 billion, it's burning a hole in their pocket. And they only have that because the Biden administration has been granting billions and billions and billions of dollars to Oklahoma, a lot of which they've misspent. I must say, there's a new audit out just today announcing that. But with all the billions of dollars that have come to Oklahoma, if they have $1 billion burning a hole in their pants that they want to give away, rather than giving it to, in this case, 2 companies, they've already awarded $250 million to Enel, that is going to create 1,400 jobs in the PVC and the photovoltaic research and manufacturing business. And then they seem to be hell bent on giving about $750 million plus. I keep hearing that there's another $200 million of infrastructure required to recruit Panasonic here. Now, I'm all for big companies moving to Oklahoma, but not when we have to give them $1 billion because of taxpayer money, whether it came from the federal government or from us. If you've got that flexibility, why not create a PPP type plan like we had in the pandemic, where we solicit, our Department of Commerce could solicit from small businesses at proposals that there would be grants available up to $250,000. This doesn't have to just be commercial. It could be nonprofits. It could be similar to the PPP. It could be covering all organizations. But if you can create 5 jobs in 3 years, or maybe it's 5 years, but if you can create 5 jobs with $250,000 and you can sustain those jobs, well, then that grant stays as a grant. If you can't do it, if you only create 2 or 3, well, then you return by way of a low interest loan those funds over a period of time. And so how many jobs would that create? So let's add up Panasonic, which is saying 4,400, and that's going to cost us $750 million minimum, more like 800, 900. Let's add up Enel, which is $250 million. So you got $1 billion. And combined, they're creating no more than 6,000 jobs. Right. Well, divide $1 billion by 250,000, assuming everybody got a max grant, which wouldn't occur, that'd be 4,000 companies. And if 4,000 companies committed to create at least 5 jobs, well, then that's 20,000 jobs. And instead of having two companies, both of which are foreign owned, both of which are in a very volatile industry. I'm in the power business, and I wouldn't bet that we're going to be, focused on lithium-ion batteries going forward 10 years from now or not. I don't know, but Panasonic doesn't have a long history in battery production, and it's a volatile industry, and so it's putting your money on Black 11. I mean, it's rolling the dice and betting, and you don't have to do that when you've got 4,000 entities out there spread all over the state. So it's not stuck in one spot. It's all over the state. And people have those grants, and they're working away, and they're developing their dream. They're developing a new idea, a new initiative, and they're hiring people and creating jobs. I just think it's a much better way to create jobs. And we know, if you look up any statistic, the great majority of jobs are created by small business rather than large business. And I've been there before. So I've been right in the position they are. I was chasing after the big company. I bought billboards outside of their Chicago offices, bragging about Oklahoma. We walked into their offices unannounced in Chicago because they wouldn't return my calls, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been to that party before, and I'll tell you that Indiana, who won that competition, probably wished they hadn't, because it wound up not being as big a job creator as they had expected, and it cost them a tremendous amount of money. So I just think it's a better way to do it. I had the privilege the other morning of attending a breakfast, one of these kind of standard little breakfasts where people kibitz together about policy. Senator Treat was invited as a speaker. I couldn't hold my tongue. I described this process. He said he agreed with that idea, so anyway, you're always in favor of small business. So maybe we'll hear that echo somewhere.
Until it comes time to act. Until it comes time to act, because we're not chasing any small businesses. We're chasing the big businesses.
Yeah.
So I want to share a compliment you got in the chat. Jana Harkins said, Governor, your diversity and inclusion efforts for women and persons of color in the state government and your political campaigns were also remarkable.
That's very kind. We worked at it, and we had people of color and individuals of color and women accounting for half of our staff, half of our cabinet, and we were proud of that. And I named two. We had a vacancy at the University of Oklahoma Board of Regents, and I was privileged one day to name two African Americans to the Board of Regents in one day. Stood in front of the law bar, and one of those was Ada Lois Scipio Fisher, who had been denied access to the law school, and Thurgood Marshall came out and defended her. That great story. It's just a wonderful story. Well, we became aware of that story and went out and literally recruited Ada Lois to come out of retirement and to complete that circle of history. And that was one of the great moments to be able to do that. And then later, I watch these other administrations that have such difficulty seemingly, being able to pull the trigger and put people of color on their boards and in their leadership positions. And it's just quite sad. So, thank you, Jana, for that. I appreciate it. We worked at it intentionally.
So you mentioned something that was in the news this week. So Ryan Walters had some board that he named folks to, and he named a Muslim citizen to the board and attributed a quote to him, said that he signed off on this quote. And the guy had to come out and say, no, I didn't. Take me off the board. I resign. I didn't.
Oh my God. I didn't say that, but I can only imagine.
So, I don't know. I don't think it should be that hard to find folks from underrepresented communities to put on boards.
No, it's not. Hard. And I don't want to, and even when I say, we really had to work at it. Well, it was, we recruited, I found Ben Demps, who was, for example, who was running the FAA, who was our leading FAA administrator in Europe. And Ben Demps was a wonderful African-American professional guy. And we found him through a series of connections, and we invited him to come back to Oklahoma and to run the Department of Human Services. And it was obviously the first time we'd had an African-American in charge of DHS, and it was the state's largest agency. And it was just a wonderful signal, I think, to everyone that diversity, inclusion, and is essential. So we try to do our best.
What it sounds like is that you were intentional, and that's really all it takes, is to be intentional, to be, to think about it,
to want to do it, and to have a plan, and to look for those opportunities. I'll give a shout out to Mayor Holt, for example. I have, I had some friends on some boards that wanted to get reappointed by Mayor Holt. And when I checked with the staff about, is it possible that they would get reappointed, just, putting in a good word for them, Frequently I would hear, we really appreciate their service, but, we're really looking for either somebody, either woman, or we're looking for somebody of color. And so they've been very intentional there. And it shows, I think, on the boards and commissions there. So a shout out for his intentional effort to do that in the city of Oklahoma City.
And that's what it's going to take. And until it just becomes natural, we have to be intentional about it. And so, thank you, Jana, for highlighting that and giving the governor a shout out and giving him an opportunity to talk about that.
Let me say one other thing about jobs, which one thing I did, and we were a little bit ahead of our time, but I converted my vehicles, my executive vehicles, my car that we used, to compress natural gas, because we were trying to demonstrate alternative fuels. And later, when Aubrey McClendon at Chesapeake Energy heard that I had done that so many years ago, because he started doing CNG, and it was historic and the first time ever, then we sent him a note and said we've already done that. But so that it didn't completely catch on, but I think it started a process that had people looking at these alternative fuels, cleaner fuels, more intentionally. But the other thing that we did at the time that we tried to take advantage of technology is we had a couple of guys from NASA who had Oklahoma connections, and we had them come up and talk to us about rural healthcare and what we could do with technology and the fledgling internet at that time. How could we take advantage of that? And they helped design a rural telecommunications system. Now remember, this is early 1990s, that where we could have an X-ray read in the Panhandle by an expert expert radiologist in a hospital in Oklahoma City. And so it was kind of a remarkable achievement. But what it taught me is, because I grew up in a town of 300 in western Oklahoma, dirt poor, just a little bitty public school. But I got a solid education there and went on to the University of Oklahoma. But what it taught me is the importance of connectivity in rural areas. And oh my God, I mean, I'm just shocked at how little progress we've made. And so we've been hammering on this issue for a long time. And so the Republican leadership, not to beat on these guys, but so their idea of connectivity was to pass something, $20 million of tax credits. So if you did it, if you paid for it, you got a tax credit. It's more complicated. Joe Biden's idea of connectivity is to give us about $1 billion and say, get it going. And not only do you put in the backbone and the infrastructure, but here's grants that are income-based grants for people that can't afford to pay for the services. Here's scholarshiping the services as well. Because if we want to save rural schools, if we want to save the rural environment that we have in Oklahoma, and I hope we do, I'm a product of that and proud of it. I want to save small rural schools. Well, the way to do that is connectivity. Rhonda and I are fortunate enough to have a lake house in Lake Eufaula. If I had better internet service in Eufaula, I'd spend a whale of a lot more time down there, because you can do this all day long in business or politics or otherwise. And if you've got the connection. And so I am so thankful on the one hand for Joe Biden pushing connectivity in rural areas as hard as he had and funding it very significantly in Oklahoma. But then I'm crazy frustrated at the notion that what's happened to that money. Well, of course, they created a commission, and this commission is just a boondoggle. I mean, they can't seem to get anything passed. It's just a massive bureaucracy. And so very, very little of that money has been spent. And I hope the auditor at some point turns her attention over there and sees what's happening there, because it's a disaster. Rural public schools so desperately need this backbone. And we passed the first bond issue in 25 years by negotiating the first compacts with Native American tribes. And that was just enough money. Now we weren't at the stage of doing gambling compacts, but we did tobacco compacts. And that generated enough money to put a new building on every college campus in Oklahoma. And it generated enough money to begin to build the backbone of fiber optics around the state, out into the state. But the money that's sitting somewhere in the state capitol, that's being sequestered, if you will, is desperately needed in these rural areas, and the jobs that it will create. There are organic ranchers out in far western Oklahoma. There's growers in the Northeast. There's all kinds of folks that desperately need to access the internet for marketing, for management of their operations, and they're very limited in that regard.
So I want to piggyback on that. So the first round of money, infrastructure money we got that was supposed to go to internet, the broadband, they figured out a way to spend a good portion of it on hiring first responders and no money to broadband.
Yeah.
So this week, the president announced that we're going to get $80 million that's supposed to go towards broadband. Let's hope that goes towards broadband. I believe our current governor is sitting on stacks of savings, so he can brag about the savings, but he's forgetting that his party in DC is threatening to come take all unspent COVID dollars. So what does that do to our economy?
Yeah.
Because we're not spending it, we're sitting on it.
Yeah, we're sitting on it, waiting for them to claw it back. So as you know, Alicia, I'm a numbers guy, and I can drive you crazy with numbers. But if you pull up the state budget over the last several years, and if you look at all state expenditures, because it was always amazing, at the time we were appropriating $4 or $5 million. Oh my God, I thought that was amazing, and yet we were getting that much and more in federal money that was coming in. So they fight like crazy over all these tax generated dollars, but they're oftentimes not very much. Well, that number has now grown. State tax generated dollars is in the $12-13 million range, but and federal money has been about historically has been about $10 billion. I'm using million. So it's in a $13 billion range, $10 billion in federal. In the last 4 years, there has been $10 billion increase each year in federal dollars coming into Oklahoma. Not quite 10 billion. So it's about $38 billion. And I challenge everybody listening and everybody else, hop on the internet, look at the budget, see if you can find out where that money went. Because I think I've been told there's about $5 billion stuck off in various accounts and auxiliary funds and this, that, and the other, where they've put it away for their special projects. And I can only imagine what that's going to be. And so, the rainy day fund has had over $1 billion in it. And so that's fine. We're all happy about the rainy day. George and I appointed me to a commission that was the reform of state government. It was all private folks, and I was a young business guy, and we recommended the rainy day fund. So I was there at the birth of the rainy day fund. So I'm all for that. But let's go find the other $5 billion that is stuck away, and let's get this connectivity money spent. Because if somebody wants to save rural Oklahoma, and there are people out there that don't, I'll just tell you that. There are lots of people that have views that it's going to die anyway, let it die a death. Well, that's just not necessary. Now that we have the ability to operate as remote as we are, let's connect it up. Let's let their public schools access what they need to do, and their businesses do the same, and we'll be a much better state for it.
Governor, I greatly appreciate you coming on and educating us and sharing your thoughts. It was going so well that we went twice the amount of time that I asked for, and you still stayed. So I'm grateful. So thank you very much. Thank you those who have joined us, and I will be back here tomorrow at 4:15.
All right. Thank you.